Good morning, and welcome to day 137 of F260 at First Baptist Meridian. Today we look at Esther chapters 8 through 10. We finish the book, and we see this book that is full of irony and role reversal. Right at the beginning, Esther's a nobody, and she becomes queen because the queen, who is somebody, gets ousted by Ahasuerus and becomes a nobody, Vashti. We see that these Hebrew characters, Esther, Mordecai, are very principled in their actions. Mordecai reminding Esther in a time of crisis that maybe you've been put here for such a time as this. And we see the characters that are Persian who are rash to act and often speak or do things without really considering the ramifications or the consequences. Ahasuerus, Xerxes, Haman, the two assassins at the beginning of the story. But as the story goes, you see everything come full circle. First, on a personal vindication for Mordecai, as Haman was ousted at yesterday's feast and hanged on the gallows he built or had built to hang Mordecai. And then today, on a national level, after Haman is executed on the gallows that he had built for Mordecai, his estate, surprise, surprise, is given to Esther. And who gets to manage that estate? You guessed it, Mordecai. Mordecai, who would sit at the gate, now rules the estate. And what's so interesting is that all these honors that Haman wanted for himself. Initially Mordecai got a parade for having saved the king's life, but then here in chapter 8, verse 15, Mordecai goes from the king's presence, clothed in royal blue and white, with a great gold crown and a purple robe of fine linen. He gets all the honor that Haman had wanted for himself without any of the arrogance or pride. Mordecai started in a humbled position, sitting at the gate and yet refusing to bow. And so one of the things that you see in all these role reversals, again, God is nowhere stated in this book, and yet I would claim he is everywhere assumed. Things working out providentially rather than by the Purim, by the lots. And I think this is one of the reasons why this book is so important in the scriptures. What looks like chance is often providence. What looks like a casting of the lots, perhaps even elsewhere in Scripture, thinking of the New Testament, when they were replacing Judas, right, among the disciples. They cast lots, and what looks like chance can be an issue of providence. That's certainly how they understood it in Acts chapter 1. They regarded that as God's direction. And so what we saw on a personal scale with Mordecai and Esther and Haman, we now see on a national scale. Things are inflated. They want Ahasuerus to revoke his edict concerning the slaughter of the Jews in all the provinces. But as we know from earlier in the story, he can't technically revoke it. Once it's law in Persia. And so what he does is he gives them permission to write an edict in which they give the Jews everywhere permission to defend themselves from those who wish to slaughter them. And when the day comes, on the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar, the Jews defend themselves, and they just have this massive victory. In fact, you really see this with regard to Haman's sons. The personal victory and the personal vindication came when Haman met his end for wishing to slaughter the Jews. On this day where they have the battle throughout the provinces, 10 of Haman's sons meet their end for wanting the same thing. And so we haven't seen a victory like this for the Jewish people since all the way back, like when? In Joshua, right? Where it just seemed, even though he's not mentioned, that the Lord himself was fighting for his people. And again, this is the great irony that we mentioned at the very beginning of Esther. The God who allowed them to be defeated in the land of promise allowed them to be defended outside of the land of promise. God is not bound to Jerusalem. That's one of the later Old Testament books make that point in so many ways. God is not bound to Jerusalem, and neither is his mission. And so because of this, they set up a feast, a festival, to commemorate this in perpetuity, the festival or the feast of Purim. And again, it refers to those lots that Haman had cast And what looked like chance ends up being an incredible story of divine providence. So, the book of Esther, God is nowhere mentioned, and yet everywhere he's assumed, because you can see his providential hand at work in protecting Esther and Mordecai and preserving his people as a whole. Keep reading, keep reflecting, keep responding, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.